Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Jonathan over at JW and wanted to come back with some more restoration tips. Now, the point of these videos are to go over the water damage, fire damage, or mold remediation kind of process without the sales tactics that go behind, unfortunately, these unexpected events where you've got a lot on your plate, you've got a restoration company in your home, and you are looking to just move forward as quickly as possible. That doesn't always equal the best things in the industry, as far as some of these companies are pretty high pressured sales. And anyways, so these videos, if you're doing your research, thank you for taking a look, and I just want to go over the overall process. So let's jump into this one, as this was an emergency water damage where the client needed help immediately, but the client had just experienced this issue a few months prior. So this client gets back from a short vacation and discovers water damage all throughout her bedroom, her hallway, and really just kind of affecting all of her floors, drywall, a main supply line underneath the slab bust, and that resulted in quite a bit of water damage. Now, fortunately, it looks like that water damage was, or the water was only running for maybe less than an hour. It did a significant amount of damage, but could have been much worse if it had happened a few days prior and they went on their vacation and it ran until they got back. So interesting story with this, and I want to give some backstory to this story. Is the client unfortunately had the exact same water damage 8 months prior. So this inside the slab where the plumbing ran, the plumber replaced a pipe in there, and unfortunately it broke again on this new water damage, but a little further up. So I'll let you know how we remediated that to prevent this from happening again. But yeah, so this lady had just went through this process. She was very familiar with her insurance company. I'm going to leave this vague, but this is one of the top insurance companies. Everybody should be able to recognize, the couple of the top insurance companies. But this particular insurance company, when she had her first water damage, she called them and truly did not know what to do. And that is the case for a lot of clients that are dealing with this for the first time. And so her mentioning, hey, I don't know what to do here, they had said, let me go ahead and get a vendor out. Now, this is important. When that vendor came out, they minimized the damage. So there was clearly walls that were still wet at the time that they left. I know this because now opening up the walls, there's essentially mold in these areas that the client said, hey, this drywall wasn't removed here. It being an exterior wall, insulation, things like that. So I was able to see that this restoration company initially did cut a significant amount of corners. The client was also not happy with the performance or the repair side of it. This particular insurance company had underpaid significantly on the repairs, and because they were using their vendors, they opted to obviously cut a ton of corners. And so the client, at the end of the day, ended up putting up baseboards, trim pieces, and essentially painting out of their own pocket because they didn't know any better. They didn't know what the process was, and the vendor that had went out and simply said, well, the insurance company is just not giving me money to do this, so you're going to have to do it on your own. So the client was already armed with this information when they called us. So they kind of knew, if we ever have water damage again, we're not going with a vendor. So one thing that we went in that first night, they had found us, we were referred to them. And so that does build a little bit of trust of, hey, this particular company knows what they're talking about. They've worked with, so-and-so before, and overall just trust the process. So very early on, this client did tell me her story. Would like to also mention that during her last repair, her insurance company did not pay to access that slab. So she was out of pocket a couple $1,000s there to essentially access the pipe and repair the pipe. And so from initially going out, we had water damage, standing water all throughout the house. We were able to get that extracted. What we noticed is in this particular room, there was carpet. We pulled that carpet up. At the moment we pulled it up off the tack strip, the backing just kind of fell off. That is something called delamination. That right there means we're just not using the carpet. So even though this was a freshwater loss, the moment we disengaged that carpet from the tack strip and we saw that delamination, I called for the carpet to be removed. Last time they had that, in place there, and they had to reuse the carpet and pad. Don't quite frankly know how they did a thorough job, but anyways, we called for flood cuts all throughout the the affected areas where there was exterior walls, so we can access the insulation. I did find mold. Again, I mentioned that earlier in the video, where the restoration company, quite frankly, just cut corners. They just were in there, they set equipment up, dried, and then that was it. They did remove some baseboard and some drywall, but it was very minor on their removal. In this hallway, she had a laminate flooring that had went throughout her hallway, pretty big hallway, and then into her kitchen. So that laminate having a underlayment underneath there, that was wet, that needed to come out. I could see obvious signs of the laminate already absorbing the water. You can't reverse that, so that laminate floor has to come out, and it's pretty toast. Now, it was interesting hearing the client's experience, and it only being 8 months apart. This was so fresh for her, of a company coming in telling her, hey, I can dry everything and I can do minimal removal. And now us coming in and saying, no, this is the proper way, we need to pull this. She was very hesitant on what the insurance company was going to pay for. And I assured her that, we submit our pricing to them, we go back and forth for repairs, we negotiate our bill, kind of gave her just, I'm here to take care of you, but we've got to trust the process. And so we had great conversations comparing apples to apples. But one thing that really stood out to her very early on was when we had a leak detection company come to find out exactly where the leak was, so the plumbing company could access that. That was something that the company did not offer to pay on the first claim, which she did have to go out of pocket for that. So that leak detection fee was about $550. Last time they didn't pay for it. This time they absolutely paid for it. Accessing it now in this situation, the plumber charged about $2,500 for access, and then I think about $500 for the actual repair. So the overall repair was about $3,000. Now, her last company that she had in there, that was a referral plumber. That was not a plumber that was sent. I think they had charged about $4,000. So she had already kind of seen a savings off of a new company in there. But more importantly, I did make it clear to her that we needed to make sure we submit the paperwork of how much the access was to repair that pipe. That was crucial because the insurance company would give her some money back. Now, they did give her money back. It was not the $2,500, it was $2,000, but nonetheless, it was $2,000 more than she had last time. Moving on to the water mitigation, she was, obviously concerned that we took out her carpet, concerned that we were taking out as much drywall that we took out in these, exterior walls, and concerned that the insurance company was, quite frankly, if they were going to pay for it or not. The mitigation I'll talk about, which is the emergency repair, and I normally don't mention price, but I'd like to give you a ballpark of what this project ended up being and versus what it was last time, so you could understand that the dollars don't necessarily matter when we're dealing with this. It's about doing the job the right way and proper documentation and setting a proper scope of work, and the dollars follow from there. So the first mitigation company that was in there 8 months prior charged about $2,500 for this, just quite frankly, removing some trim, cutting some little holes in the drywall, and stuffing their equipment in. They paid about $2,500. Now on the repairs, when everything was dialed back in, this insurance company, reset the carpet, paid for some drywall. Client ended up having to paint their entire room. They paid for some trim, but that was about $2,500 as well. So the client had, I think, $1,000 deductible. So this claim was, essentially a $5,000 claim on the last one. Now, our mitigation being done properly, so we pulled everything out. dried everything, antimicrobial everywhere, and we submitted our bill. Again, ballparks here, but our bill was $12,000. Now, not saying that number to say, look, we're overpriced, or, what did that guy do for $2,500 versus what we did for, essentially this $12,000 number. But this is where, when the proper scope of work is being set and we're following it, again, the dollar doesn't matter. I don't go around and just throw out a random number and say, this is the cost to do this project. We're going in and we removed, 30 linear feet of drywall. This is the calculation. We put it into the program that, quite frankly, most restoration companies and the insurance companies use. So I'm not really necessarily making my own price up. I'm just putting in a calculation. This is how many fans I had in there for this many days. This is how many DUs I had, and so on and so forth. So in that situation, obviously her concerns of, we're doing all of this work, is your portion going to be covered? We had proper documentation, a ton of moisture readings, a ton of photos of when we arrived, when we extracted, when we were doing the removal, when we were drying. So we definitely document what is needed. Now, moving on to, again, setting the proper scope, we removed the carpet, we removed the laminate floor. These are things that they didn't do last time that should have been done. And especially with I'm going to make a side note for anybody that might know this with carpet, but that carpet also had like a pet barrier. So it's got a plastic top. So if you're in this industry and you're watching this video and you say, you can dry carpet and you can dry pads, while there is a time and place, at a bare minimum, the last company should have removed the pad because it had this waterproof barrier that you just simply could not dry, especially with it being a slab leak. They pulled it up in the one area to repair it and laid it back down. So come on, it's not the right way of doing it. Moving on to repairs. Now, one thing that I suggested to the client, and the way that their plumbing worked, is we were able to determine with the plumber that there was this U shape in the plumbing. So essentially what had happened is there was an addition 15 years prior. And when they did the addition, they wanted to put the water line, because this was the main line that was actually busted underneath the house. They actually just rerouted it. So you had this like U pipeline that went through the house. And these elbows are what caused the issue. So client obviously never wants to deal with this again. So they took their money, and instead of doing the repair and doing the access, they actually decided to put that in and pay a little bit more and have the piping completely relocated and completely just remove the piping from outside. So I think that overall cost was, maybe $5,000 to do. They came out of pocket a couple $1,000s. But yeah, this was a good situation for them to essentially say, hey, we're not going to have this issue anymore. Now, I'm also not an insurance company or, whatever it is, but I'm sure as an insurance company, they could also appreciate that, look, we had an issue 8 months ago and you paid out. We had this issue again. We don't ever want to deal with this issue again. Let's just go ahead and remove this piping and do it the right way. So that has been done. They won't be having this issue in the home anymore. They just completely abandoned those lines and did it the right way. So going over to repairs, we obviously got the client carpet, drywall, paint, trim work, and that laminate taken care of. Going over ballpark numbers, the insurance company settled in about the $22K range. Overall, remember that number being about $2,500 in repairs before, now is up at the $20K mark. Now, again, in the situation that this client was in, she trusted the insurance vendor. And the vendor came in and, I'm not speaking ill of the guy. I don't know him. I don't know the company, him or her. But they did not set the proper scope of work. And to be honest, they took the job like they could dry it. They stuffed their equipment in. They removed a couple things at a bare minimum and dried accordingly. Now, while that may have worked for that company and it may have worked for the insurance company, it was a very minimal payout. It was not done the right way. And I know this by the moment I pulled the carpet, we had severe delamination. The moment we pulled this drywall, had mold behind the walls. And then we did have some mold under that underlayment from the first water damage on this laminate floor. So really unfortunate that the proper scope of work was not done or was not set from the start, because it would have trickled down this process of, okay, we need to pay for carpet. Okay, we need to pay for, getting those walls re-insulated. So really, if you're dealing with this situation, or you're dealing with a water damage where you just quite frankly don't know where to go, I think you finding yourself on this video is great. But you got to take a step back, and you have to interview companies. You have to trust the company that's coming in, that is essentially going to go to the insurance company for you and say, look, these are the legitimate damages, and this is the legitimate scope of work, and this is the real number to get this repaired. And they're able to take care of you accordingly, right? So really investigate the restoration company that you're using. It's okay to get second or third opinions, and it's okay to just, get that standing water up by all means necessary, and take a second. You don't have too long, maybe a day of calling some people, getting some people interviewed out there, and then making a decision to move forward immediately. Now, there is this fear-mongering tactic of, I've got to start drying right away, or it's going to create further damage. In this situation where the client had so much water, and walking into a flooded home is scary and wow, right? But knowing that most of the damage is already done, right? So if the client would have simply extracted the water that evening and then said, hey, I'm going to pause this until tomorrow morning, which quite frankly she did. She paused us until she could contact her insurance company and make sure they, if they had any questions, they could talk to us. But in that order of the damage is done, you have an opportunity to say, okay, let me get a couple companies in here. Let me get their opinions on what's going on in here, and who do I feel comfortable with? You don't always have to go with the insurance vendor. That is something that is definitely convenient, but I see that not work probably 8 out of 10 times. Now, there are some great companies out there that do great things, but normally I see it going all over the place. So anyways, I hope you found this video informational, and make sure you give it a like. Sounds kind of weird saying that, but appreciate you taking the time. And if you got any questions, drop it in the comments or give me a call. Happy to answer any questions. All right, guys, thank you.